"Which bedroom will Tyler get?" my brother asked while I was still waiting for the bank to approve the final paperwork on the house. I remember staring at him across the restaurant table, convinced I had misheard. The house wasn't mine yet. I hadn't even signed the closing documents. Yet somehow Harold was already talking as if my future home belonged to his family. I smiled politely and took a sip of iced tea. At 68 years old, I had learned that sometimes silence reveals more than questions ever could. My name is Evelyn Carter, and what happened next changed the way I looked at family forever. For 30 years, I had dreamed about owning a house that was truly mine. After my husband passed away, I stayed in the small rental home we had shared during his final years. It was comfortable enough, but it never felt permanent. Every month, I wrote another rent check. Every year, I watched housing prices climb higher. While friends traveled or bought luxury cars, I saved every extra dollar. I skipped vacations. I repaired old appliances instead of replacing them. I packed lunches instead of eating out. Little by little, year after year, I built a savings account for one purpose. I wanted a home with a front porch, a small backyard, and enough space to enjoy my retirement in peace. 3 months before this conversation, I finally found it. The house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees. It had 4 bedrooms, large windows, and a backyard that caught the evening sunlight perfectly. The moment I stepped onto the property, I could picture myself there. I imagined drinking coffee on the porch. I imagined planting flowers along the fence. For the first time since losing my husband, I felt excited about the future. I made an offer the same week. The seller accepted. Everything seemed to be falling into place. At least, that's what I thought. Harold had always been my older brother, the confident one who expected life to work in his favor. Growing up, he usually got what he wanted. Even now, at 72, he carried himself with the same certainty. He lived with his wife Linda and often complained about how crowded their house felt whenever their adult children visited. Still, I never imagined that would become my problem. During that lunch, Harold leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Tyler would probably like the room facing the backyard," he said casually. "And Linda already has ideas for the kitchen." I set my glass down. "What do you mean?" I asked. Harold looked surprised by the question. "Your new house," he said. "There's plenty of room. It'll make sense once we're all settled." Settled. The word hung in the air between us. I waited for him to laugh. I waited for him to explain that he was joking. Instead, he reached for another breadstick and continued discussing my house as if plans had already been finalized. He talked about family gatherings. He talked about future holidays. He talked about how convenient it would be for everyone. Not once did he ask what I wanted. Not once did he mention that I had spent decades working toward this goal. According to Harold, the house was simply the next resource available to the family. When lunch ended, I drove home in silence. The sales brochure sat on the passenger seat beside me. At a red light, I glanced down at the photograph of the house and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was realization. For years, I had mistaken Harold's expectations for affection. I had confused entitlement with closeness. As I pulled into my driveway, I understood something that would become impossible to ignore. My brother wasn't celebrating my dream. He was already planning how to take ownership of it. And that was only the beginning. I did not sleep much that night. Harold's words kept replaying in my mind, not because they were loud or cruel, but because of how natural they sounded coming from him. He had not asked if he could stay in my future house. He had not suggested it. He had spoken as though the decision had already been made. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I looked around the small rental I had called home for nearly 12 years. The walls were plain. The carpet had faded in several places. The windows rattled whenever strong winds moved through town. Yet every corner held memories. It was where I learned how to live alone after losing my husband. It was where I rebuilt my confidence one small step at a time. Most importantly, it was where I learned that peace often comes from having a space that belongs only to you. As the morning light filtered through the blinds, I found myself thinking about the years that led to this moment. After my husband passed away, many people assumed I would move in with family. Some suggested I live with Harold and Linda. Others recommended retirement communities. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about what an older woman should do with her life. Very few people asked what I wanted. The truth was simple. I wanted independence. I wanted to make my own decisions. I wanted a future that did not depend on anyone else's approval. That dream had carried me through difficult years. Every extra shift I worked, every unnecessary expense I avoided, every sacrifice had a purpose. The house represented more than property. It represented freedom. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Linda. Her cheerful voice immediately put me on guard. She rarely called unless she needed something. After a few minutes of small talk, she casually asked whether I had chosen paint colors yet. I told her I had not. "Well, that is fine," she said. "Tyler likes darker colors anyway. He can pick when we move in." I nearly dropped the phone. There it was again. The same assumption. The same certainty. Not a request. Not a discussion. A plan. I responded politely and ended the conversation as quickly as possible. Afterward, I sat quietly in my living room. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Somehow Harold and Linda had already created an entire future inside a house they did not own. They had assigned bedrooms. They had discussed renovations. They had imagined family gatherings. The only thing missing from their plans was my opinion. Later that afternoon, I pulled out an old photo album. Sometimes when life feels confusing, I find comfort in looking backward. As I turned the pages, memories surfaced that I had not thought about in years. Harold had always expected help. When he needed money for unexpected expenses, I helped. When his children needed school supplies years ago, I helped. When family emergencies happened, I helped. At the time, I believed that was what family did. You showed up for each other. You gave when you could. You trusted that kindness would be respected. Looking back, I realized something uncomfortable. The help had always flowed in one direction. I had spent years telling myself that did not matter. Yet now, as I stared at those photographs, I began connecting pieces that I had ignored for far too long. Harold never seemed grateful when I helped. He seemed expectant, as though my support was not generosity, but obligation. The more I thought about it, the heavier that realization became. By evening, I stood at my kitchen window watching the sun disappear behind the rooftops. For the first time since finding my dream house, excitement had been replaced by doubt. Not doubt about buying the house, doubt about the people surrounding me. And deep down, a question was beginning to form. If Harold already felt entitled to my future before I even owned it, how far would he go once the keys were actually in my hand? 3 days later, Harold invited the family to Sunday dinner. Normally, I would have looked forward to it. Family gatherings had always been important to me, even when they were imperfect. But this invitation felt different. Ever since our conversations about the house, an uneasy feeling had settled in the back of my mind. Still, I went. Part of me hoped I was overthinking everything. Part of me wanted proof that I was wrong. When I arrived, Linda greeted me warmly and led me inside. The smell of roast chicken filled the house. Laughter drifted from the dining room. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Children moved between rooms. Conversations overlapped. Plates clattered in the kitchen. It looked like every family gathering we had shared for years. Yet the moment I sat down, I noticed something strange. Harold kept bringing the conversation back to my future home. At first it was subtle. He mentioned how convenient the neighborhood would be. Then he commented on the size of the backyard. Later he joked about finally having enough room for family holidays. Each remark drew polite laughter from a few relatives. Each remark made me more uncomfortable. Then Linda brought out a folder. She placed it on the dining room table and smiled. "We have been collecting ideas," she said. My stomach tightened. Harold opened the folder and began removing pages. Floor plans, furniture layouts, color samples. I stared at them in disbelief. They had spent time planning changes to a house they did not own. Worse, they acted as though everyone should be impressed by their effort. Harold pointed to one sketch. "This room would work perfectly for Tyler," he said. He moved his finger to another page. "And this space could become a family room once we remove that wall." Around the table, several relatives nodded as though these plans were completely reasonable. I sat quietly. No one seemed surprised. No one asked whether I agreed. It was as if an entire conversation had taken place without me. Then came the moment I will never forget. Harold leaned back in his chair and said, "You have spent years taking care of yourself. Now it is time to think about the bigger picture." The room fell silent. I looked around the table. A few people avoided eye contact. Others studied their plates. Nobody challenged him. Nobody reminded him that I had earned this opportunity through decades of sacrifice. In that moment, I understood something important. Harold was not testing boundaries. He believed the boundaries did not exist. He genuinely felt entitled to make decisions about my future. I smiled politely and changed the subject. The conversation moved on, but my perspective had changed forever. On the drive home, rain tapped softly against the windshield. Streetlights reflected across the wet pavement. I thought about everything I had witnessed that evening. The folder, the floor plans, the confidence, the assumption that my dream belonged to everyone except me. By the time I reached home, I was no longer confused. I was no longer searching for explanations. The evidence was sitting right in front of me. Harold and Linda had already written themselves into a future that I had spent 30 years building. As I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, one realization settled heavily in my mind. If they were this comfortable making plans in public, what private conversations had they already been having behind my back? The following week, I tried to focus on practical matters. There were inspections to schedule, documents to review, and phone calls to return. Buying a home involved more details than most people realized. Every day seemed to bring another form, another signature, another decision. Normally, those tasks would have filled me with excitement. Instead, they became distractions from the growing unease I felt whenever I thought about Harold and Linda. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove past the property again. The maple trees along the street swayed gently in the breeze. The lawn had recently been trimmed. Sunlight reflected from the large front windows. For a few minutes, I sat in my car and simply looked at it. I tried to picture the future I had imagined for so many years. Quiet mornings, gardening on weekends, reading on the porch while watching the sunset. It was still the future I wanted, yet something had changed. The dream no longer felt entirely protected. As I sat there, my phone vibrated. A message from Linda appeared on the screen. Attached was a photograph of a furniture set. "This would look perfect in the downstairs family room," she wrote. I stared at the message. Not once had I mentioned creating a family room. That idea had come entirely from their plans. A few minutes later, another message arrived. This time it was from Harold. "Have you asked whether the seller would leave the storage shed? Tyler could use it." I locked my phone and placed it face down on the passenger seat. The confidence behind those messages unsettled me more than any argument could have. They were not asking permission. They were discussing arrangements. Later that evening, I opened an old filing cabinet in my living room. I had been searching for tax records, but I found something else instead. A collection of handwritten notes, birthday cards, and family letters spanning nearly 20 years. As I sorted through them, memories surfaced one after another. There was the time Harold asked to borrow money for a business idea that never materialized. The time I spent weeks helping organize a fundraiser for one of his community projects. The time I canceled personal plans to assist during a family emergency. I had always believed these moments reflected loyalty. Looking back, another pattern emerged. Whenever I needed support, the enthusiasm faded. Promises became delays. Offers became excuses. The imbalance had existed for years. I simply had not wanted to see it. The next morning, I met my friend Rebecca for coffee. She worked in real estate and had followed my home search from the beginning. Unlike many people, Rebecca listened more than she spoke. After hearing about the recent events, she grew unusually quiet. She stirred her coffee slowly before finally looking up. "Evelyn," she said gently, "I hope you are protecting your interests." I smiled and assured her everything was under control. But her words lingered long after our conversation ended. Protecting my interests. Such a simple phrase. Yet I realized I had spent most of my life protecting everyone else's interests first. That evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table reviewing paperwork. The room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Outside, darkness settled over the neighborhood. Inside, a different kind of clarity began settling over me. For the first time, I stopped asking whether Harold and Linda were serious. They were. The real question was something far more important. If they had already built expectations around my future, what would happen when those expectations collided with reality? Over the next few days, I stopped reacting and started observing. It was amazing how much people revealed when they believed their plans were already secure. Harold called twice that week. Neither conversation focused on how I was doing. Neither conversation included questions about the closing process or whether I felt nervous about such a major purchase. Instead, he talked about logistics. He mentioned where holiday decorations could be stored. He discussed parking arrangements when family members visited. At one point, He even brought up replacing part of the backyard fence. I listened quietly. The more he spoke, the more I realized that my role in his vision had become strangely small. Somehow, I was no longer the person who had spent decades saving for this opportunity. I was simply the owner on paper. The rest of the future had already been assigned to someone else. One afternoon, while organizing old documents, I found a photo from nearly 20 years earlier. It showed Harold and me standing beside our parents at a family picnic. I studied the image for several minutes. At first, I felt nostalgic. Then I noticed something else. Even in that photograph, I was carrying the cooler, holding extra bags, and managing details while Harold stood comfortably with his hands in his pockets. The image seemed insignificant until more memories followed. I remembered helping him move twice. I remembered watching his children when they were young. I remembered lending him money during difficult periods. None of those things bothered me at the time. Family helped family. That was how I had always viewed life. What troubled me now was a different realization. I struggled to remember moments when the effort flowed the other direction. The imbalance had never arrived all at once. It had developed gradually, over years, hidden beneath familiar routines and family expectations. Because each request seemed reasonable on its own, I rarely questioned it. Looking back, I understood that small assumptions often grow into larger ones. A person who believes they are entitled to your time may eventually feel entitled to your resources. A person who feels entitled to your resources may eventually believe they are entitled to your future. That evening, I received another message from Linda. This time it contained links to furniture and home decor items. She wrote that she was creating a list of ideas for shared spaces. Shared spaces. I stared at those words for a long moment. There it was again. Not a suggestion, not a possibility, an assumption. I closed the message without responding. Later that night, I sat by the window and watched rain slide down the glass. The street outside was quiet. A few porch lights glowed in the darkness. For the first time since all of this began, I felt something unexpected. Calm. Not because the situation had improved. It had not. The assumptions were becoming more obvious with each passing day. The calm came from clarity. Confusion creates anxiety. Clarity creates decisions. I was beginning to understand exactly what was happening. Harold and Linda were not waiting to see what choice I would make. They believed the choice had already been made. They were building expectations on a foundation that did not belong to them. And the more confident they became, the more certain I became that a difficult conversation was approaching. What they did not know was that I had already started looking at the situation differently. I was no longer asking how to make everyone happy. I was beginning to ask how to protect the life I had spent 30 years building. The turning point arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I had spent most of the morning reviewing paperwork and organizing documents for the upcoming closing. The process was moving forward smoothly, and for the first time in days, I felt cautiously optimistic. Around 2 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca's name. I answered with a smile, expecting another routine conversation about inspections or financing. Instead, her voice carried a hesitation I had not heard before. "Evelyn," she said carefully, "there is something I think you should know." I sat down immediately. Rebecca explained that she had received an unusual call earlier that day. Someone had contacted the listing agent connected to the property. At first, nothing about that seemed remarkable. Then she told me who had made the call. "Harold." For several seconds, I said nothing. Rebecca continued. According to the agent, Harold had introduced himself as a close family member who would be living in the home. He had asked questions about future modifications. He had discussed storage options. He had even mentioned plans involving multiple family members occupying the property. The agent found the conversation strange because none of those details had ever appeared in the official paperwork. When Rebecca learned who the caller was, she immediately thought of our recent conversations. I thanked her for telling me and ended the call. Then I sat perfectly still. The room felt unusually quiet. Outside, a lawn mower hummed somewhere in the distance. Inside, the silence seemed heavier than before. For weeks, I had suspected that Harold and Linda were building expectations around my future. Now I knew something more troubling. They were no longer simply discussing those expectations among themselves. They were acting on them. They were presenting those assumptions to other people as though they were already facts. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands remained steady. Strangely, I did not feel angry. Anger would have implied surprise. What I felt instead was certainty. Every uncomfortable conversation, every casual assumption, every message about furniture, bedrooms, and renovations suddenly fit together. The puzzle was complete. Later that evening, I opened my notebook and began writing down everything that had happened over the past month. The lunch conversation, the folder of floor plans, the repeated references to moving in, the messages from Linda, the phone call to the listing agent. Seeing the events listed one after another created a powerful effect. Individually, each incident could be dismissed. Together, they revealed a pattern that could no longer be ignored. As darkness settled outside my windows, I looked around the small rental home that had sheltered me through so many chapters of life. For years, I had believed that being generous meant avoiding conflict. I thought keeping the peace was always the right choice. But sitting there that night, I realized something important. Protecting yourself is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. Refusing to surrender your future is not a betrayal of family. The true betrayal happens when people decide your sacrifices belong to them. By the time I went to bed, my decision was not fully formed, but it was beginning to take shape. For the first time since this situation started, I stopped worrying about how Harold would react. Instead, I focused on a much simpler question. What kind of life did I want for myself? And as I drifted off to sleep, I already knew the answer. The next morning, I woke up with a level of clarity I had not felt in weeks. The uncertainty was gone. The doubt was gone. For nearly a month, I had been reacting to other people's expectations. Now, for the first time, I was thinking only about my own future. After breakfast, I sat at my kitchen table and reviewed the numbers again. The house was beautiful. It checked every box on the list I had carried for years. But as I studied the paperwork, I realized something important. My dream had never been about that specific property. My dream had been about freedom. Somewhere along the way, I had allowed myself to believe those two things were the same. They were not. A house was a building. Freedom was a choice. Around 10 o'clock, I called Rebecca. She answered on the second ring. We spoke for nearly an hour. I asked questions about alternatives. I asked questions about timing. Most importantly, I asked questions about options that would give me greater control over my life. Rebecca listened carefully. She never pressured me. She simply provided information. By the end of the conversation, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The decision was not emotional. It was practical, calm, thoughtful, and completely mine. Later that afternoon, I contacted the appropriate people and began the process of withdrawing from the purchase. There was paperwork involved. There were conversations to have. There were deadlines to consider. But surprisingly, I felt lighter with every step. Instead of mourning the loss of the property, I felt relieved. The pressure that had been building inside me for weeks began to disappear. I was no longer carrying the weight of other people's assumptions. I was reclaiming ownership of my future. What made the experience even more revealing was how quietly it happened. There was no family meeting, no dramatic confrontation, no angry phone calls. I did not announce my decision. I did not explain myself. I simply handled my business. For years, I had believed that major decisions required approval from the people around me. Now I understood that some decisions only required self-respect. Over the next several days, I kept my plans private. Harold continued sending occasional messages. Linda continued sharing ideas and suggestions. Neither of them had any reason to suspect that everything was changing. Their confidence remained untouched. Meanwhile, my attention shifted toward possibilities I had not seriously considered before. One afternoon, Rebecca showed me several properties that offered something the house could not. Simplicity, security, convenience. The more I learned, the more interested I became. Instead of worrying about yard maintenance, repairs, and unused space, I began imagining a life designed entirely around my own needs. No extra bedrooms for other people's plans. No oversized spaces waiting to be claimed by relatives. Just a comfortable home that reflected the life I actually wanted. One evening, I sat on my porch and watched the sun sink below the horizon. The sky glowed orange and gold above the rooftops. For weeks, I had felt as though events were happening to me. But now the balance had shifted. I was no longer reacting. I was choosing. And although nobody else knew it yet, a chapter that Harold and Linda had spent weeks planning was already coming to an end. The future they imagined was disappearing quietly, one signature at a time. And the future I wanted was finally beginning to take shape. About 3 weeks later, I found the place that felt right the moment I walked through the door. It was a condominium in a well-maintained community on the edge of town. The building overlooked a small park filled with walking paths, flower beds, and mature oak trees. The unit itself was not enormous, and that was exactly what I liked about it. Every square foot served a purpose. The living room was bright and welcoming. The kitchen had modern appliances and enough space for the meals I enjoyed preparing. A private balcony overlooked a peaceful courtyard where neighbors gathered in the evenings to talk and relax. As I stood there, listening to birds in the trees below, I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Relief. This place was not designed for other people's expectations. It was designed for the life I actually wanted. Rebecca smiled as she watched me explore the property. She did not need to ask what I was thinking. By then, she knew me well enough to recognize when a decision had already been made. Within days, the paperwork moved forward smoothly. There were inspections, meetings, and final reviews, but everything felt remarkably simple compared to the stress I had experienced before. Most importantly, every decision centered on my needs alone. No one was assigning bedrooms. No one was discussing renovations. No one was making assumptions about future living arrangements. For the first time in months, the process felt peaceful. During that period, Harold and Linda remained completely unaware of the changes taking place. Their messages continued arriving from time to time. Linda sent photographs of decorating ideas. Harold mentioned future family gatherings. Each message revealed that they were still imagining the same future they had constructed weeks earlier. I responded politely when necessary, but offered very little information. Not because I was trying to deceive anyone. I simply no longer felt obligated to explain every decision I made. One Friday afternoon, I received confirmation that everything had been finalized. The condominium was officially mine. I sat quietly at my kitchen table after the call ended. Sunlight streamed through the window. A gentle breeze moved the curtains. For several minutes, I simply absorbed the moment. 30 years of planning, years of saving, years of sacrifice, and now I finally had a home that reflected the life I wanted to live, not the life someone else wanted to build around me. The following weekend, I visited the property again. Residents greeted each other by name. People walked their dogs along the paths. Others sat on benches reading books or enjoying the weather. The atmosphere felt calm and welcoming. I could picture myself there immediately. Morning coffee on the balcony, evening walks through the park, quiet weekends free from endless maintenance projects. As I stood near the entrance, I realized something important. The dream had survived. It had simply changed shape. Sometimes we become attached to a specific version of the future and forget the deeper reason we wanted it in the first place. I had not spent 30 years working toward a particular address. I had worked toward independence, security, peace, and now those goals were finally within reach. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Harold and Linda were still making plans for a future that no longer existed. They simply had not discovered it yet. But that discovery was coming. And when it arrived, it would force everyone to confront a reality they never expected. The truth came out on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on the balcony of my new condominium, enjoying a mild spring breeze and reading a novel when my phone began ringing. Harold's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting the call go to voicemail. Then I answered. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. When Harold finally spoke, his voice sounded completely different from his usual confident tone. "Rebecca told Linda you bought a condo," he said. I closed my book and looked out toward the park below. Children were riding bicycles along the walking path. A couple sat beneath an oak tree sharing lunch. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the tension I could hear in his voice. "Yes," I replied. Another pause followed. "What happened to the house?" he asked. The question itself revealed everything. Not "how are you?" Not "congratulations." Not "are you happy?" His first concern was the property. I explained calmly that I had changed my plans. I told him I found something better suited to my needs. For a few moments, he said nothing. Then came the response I had expected. He talked about the extra space. He talked about family gatherings. He talked about opportunities that had been lost. Listening to him, I realized he was mourning a future that had never belonged to him in the first place. When he finally stopped speaking, I answered with the same calmness that had guided every decision over the previous month. "Harold, I was choosing a home for myself, not for everyone else." The line went quiet. I could almost hear him processing those words. For years, Our family dynamic had operated according to assumptions that no one questioned. I helped. Others benefited. Expectations grew. Boundaries faded. But something had changed. I was no longer participating in that pattern. A few days later, a larger family gathering took place. News travels quickly in families, and by then everyone knew about my move. Several relatives approached me with questions. Some seemed surprised. Others seemed curious. A few appeared disappointed, though I suspected their disappointment had more to do with Harold's expectations than my actual decision. What struck me most was how simple the truth sounded once spoken aloud. I wanted a home that matched my lifestyle. I wanted peace. I wanted independence. Those reasons felt completely reasonable. Yet for weeks, I had allowed myself to feel guilty for pursuing them. That guilt disappeared the moment I stopped defending my choices. During the gathering, Harold remained polite but distant. For the first time in a long while, he seemed unsure of himself. The confidence that had fueled months of assumptions had vanished. Reality had arrived, and reality did not match the story he had created. As the afternoon unfolded, I found myself laughing more easily than I had in months. The tension was gone. The anxiety was gone. Most importantly, the constant pressure to manage other people's expectations was gone. Later that evening, I returned home and stepped onto my balcony as the sun began to set. Golden light spread across the park. Neighbors walked their dogs. Birds settled into the trees for the night. I leaned against the railing and took a deep breath. 30 years earlier, I thought success meant finally owning a certain kind of house. Now I understood something much more valuable. Success is waking up in a life that belongs to you. It is making decisions without fear. It is protecting the future you worked hard to build. Looking out at the peaceful view below, I felt grateful for every difficult moment that had led me there. Not because those moments were pleasant, but because they taught me an important lesson. Family can offer love, support, and connection, but no one has the right to claim ownership of your dreams. Those dreams belong to the person who sacrificed for them. And for the first time in many years, my future belonged entirely to me.